Alright, so the purpose of this video is to go through the practice test that will help prepare you for the real logic test that's coming up. I have looked at the real test and I've created this test to be very similar. The only thing that's different is the words and the numbers are changed. Everything else should be the same. So if you do really well on this practice test, you should do fine on the real test. So let's just go ahead and jump into number one. So number one, but first of all, let me just tell you how the way this video is going to work. So right now you're inside a program called Edpuzzle if you launched this video from Canvas. So Edpuzzle is going to pause and ask you for what the answer for number one is. What do you think the answer for number one is? You're going to enter your answer, and then you are going to be able to see me work out the problem or to tell you the answer to see if you got it right or not. So all I need you to do is click on A, B, C, or D in the right hand side of the screen and let me know what you think number one is. So go ahead and do that now. Alright, so number one says, which is the biconditional of the statement, if you have a job, then you can go to the movies every weekend. So that is a conditional statement, since it's if-then, and the biconditional statement is going to have the words if and only if. So I'm going to look through my answer choices and see which one has if and only if. So I have B has the words if and only if, and C has if and only if. So I can go ahead and rule out A and D because those do not have the words if and only if. So we're looking for the biconditional. So the correct answer is B. And the reason it is B is because we have just taken the hypothesis, you have a job, the biconditional we've added in is if and only if, and then we write the conclusion, which is you can go to the movies every weekend. So here is you have a job if and only if you can go to the movies every weekend. The reason it is not C is because we changed the meaning of the conditional statement. This says you do not have a job. That's not what our original conditional statement says. All right, so let's go ahead and look at problem 2. What is a counterexample to the following statement? And the statement says all letters in the alphabet have line symmetry. So remember, a counterexample is anything that proves that this statement right here is false. And we may need to back up to the previous unit and talk about line symmetry. Remember, line symmetry is when I can draw a line through a figure and fold it across that line, and both parts of the figure will match up perfectly. So all of these letters essentially can be folded in half except for one of them and match up perfectly on each side. So W, I could draw a line down the center, so that does not prove that this is wrong. O, I can fold that way or this way. So that doesn't prove that our statement is wrong. T, I can also fold this way. So T doesn't prove. The only letter that I can't fold in half and have each part match up perfectly is K. So the answer is A. So for number 3, it says write the contrapositive of the following statement. If you graduate high school, then you will receive a diploma. So I want you to go ahead and type in the contrapositive on Edpuzzle. All right, so how did you do? So the contrapositive, remember, is going to be in the form of if not P, we need to switch and negate. So that means we're going to say not Q. If not Q, then not P. Well, you graduate high school is our hypothesis, so that's P. You will receive a diploma is the conclusion, that's Q. So I just need to negate both of those and switch them. So I'm going to start with the conclusion because I have to switch. If you did not receive a diploma, that's how we're going to negate it. If you did not receive a diploma, that's Q, not Q. We got that by adding the word not. Then you did not graduate high school. So that is the correct answer. We have flipped and negated the original contrapositive. Let's look at number 4. Number 4 says, consider the following statement. If 5x is equal to 25, then x is equal to 5. And the question is asking you which illustrates the contrapositive of the statement. Now, I'll give you a hint that this symbol means not equal to. So go ahead and click on A, B, C, or D, depending on what you think the answer is. Okay, remember, the contrapositive, we're going to say not Q. If not Q, then not P. So that means we have to flip and negate. So if, let's see, x equals 25, that's going to be my P. X equals 5 is my Q. P is always the hypothesis, Q is the conclusion. So I just need to say not Q. Well, not Q would be x is not equal to 5. So I can rule out A because that says x is equal to 5. And I can rule out C because that says x is equal to 5. And we know that negating it says x is not equal to 5. So it has to be B or D. So I'm going to say if x is not equal to 5, then 5x is not equal to 25. That is your correct answer, because that is actually flipping this and negating it. All right. Let's look at number 5. Number 5 says, which of the following is the symbolic representation of the given argument? So P represents it is snowing outside, and Q represents it is winter. And the statement that they give us is, if it is not snowing outside, then it is winter. So we need to write that in symbolic form. So it is not snowing outside. That's going to be my P. It is winter. That's going to be my Q. So since this says it is not snowing outside, we have negated what P represents. Up here, P says it is snowing. So it is not snowing means that we're going to have to add a not in front of the P, a not symbol. But it is winter, we did not negate that. It is winter matches Q, it is winter. So I know that my symbol needs to start with not P. So I can rule out A, I can rule out B, and so my answer is going to have to be C or D. Well, all I need to do is add an arrow between these two things. If not P, then Q. And that will give me the symbolic representation of if it is not snowing outside, then it is winter. All right, moving right along, let's look at number 6. Number 6 says, which is the converse of the following conditional statement? And the conditional statement says a polygon with 3 sides is called a triangle. So I'm going to take out the word conditional from this. This is a typo. Since this sentence is not in the form of if-then, it is not a conditional statement. So in order to get the converse, remember the converse is switching. Q, if Q, then P. So we're switching the hypothesis and the conclusion. So we're going to need to turn this into a conditional statement before we can get the converse. And you can probably do this in your head, but I'm just going to write it out. If a polygon has 3 sides, then it is a triangle. That turns it into, let me clean that up. That turns it into a conditional statement. And so my hypothesis is a polygon has 3 sides, and my conclusion is it is a triangle. So they want to know the converse. So remember, the converse is switching. So I need to start out with if it is a triangle. So I can rule out A, because it says if a polygon is not a triangle. We don't want to add the word not. We just want to switch it. We don't want to negate anything. Here, if a polygon is a triangle, then it has 3 sides. Well, that looks like it matches. So the answer is B. It can't be C because this says if a polygon has 3 sides, then it is called a triangle. Well, that's the same thing as my conditional statement, so I can rule that out. And again, D has the word not in it, and we are not negating anything with the converse, so we can rule D out. All right, let's look at number 7. Number 7 is a little tricky. It's either going to be the law of syllogism or the law of detachment, and depending on which one of those it is going to determine what your answer choice is. And so the first thing we need to do is to figure out if it is the law of syllogism or detachment. And remember, the law of syllogisms has 2 if-then statements. So let's look at our first statement. If it is cold outside, then it is December. Okay? Now the second statement is what we're looking for, so let's look at our answer choices. All of my answer choices are in if-then format. So if-then on the first line, if-then on the second line, that makes it the law of syllogism. And the third line is actually our conclusion. If it is cold outside, then you will have 2 weeks off from school. So remember, our law of syllogism says if P, then Q. And then the second line starts with Q and ends with a whole nother conclusion. And our argument, the conclusion to our argument is therefore P, if P, then R. So the way we're going to do is we're going to have to kind of work backwards. We know that the conclusion of the first statement needs to become the hypothesis of the second statement. So let's go ahead and write that in. If it is December. All right? Because this and this have to match. So we can go ahead and write that. The only thing we don't know is we don't know the conclusion then. So let's go ahead and start looking at our answer choices. We know that our conclusion needs to match the conclusion of the last statement. So the conclusion of the last statement is you will have 2 weeks off from school. And the reason that works is because, look, Q and Q match. That's where this and this match, the conclusion and the hypothesis match. And then so our answer is P and R. Well, P, we've already determined up here, is if it is cold outside. The R comes from the conclusion of our last statement, which is right here. R. So our final answer should be if it is December, then you will have 2 weeks off from school. You will have 2 weeks off from school. So this problem is just getting you to work backwards. So let's look at our answer choices. If it is December, then you will have 2 weeks off from school. Well, there we go. There's our answer. B is not the correct answer because we've added the word it is not December and it is not cold outside. Well, cold outside doesn't even match our conclusion that we're supposed to have. So let's mark that out. C says if it is December, then you will have 2 weeks off from school. Uh-oh, that looks like a typo because that means the same thing as A. That is just a typo, so in this example, A or C would be your correct answer. D is not correct because it does not have the correct conclusion. Our conclusion is supposed to be you will have 2 weeks off from school. The conclusion here is it is cold outside. So we can rule out D. All right, moving right along, number 8. Number 8 gives us a conditional statement. The statement not Q, let me draw that a little bit darker. If not Q, then not P. So the problem is saying that this statement is equivalent to which one of these 4? So remember, not Q, if not Q, then not P. That looks like the contrapositive of a conditional statement. And remember, the contrapositive is not Q, if not Q, then not, not P. So to get the original statement, we need to undo this. And we know that we got the contrapositive by flipping and negating it. So if we flip it and negate it again, we'll be back to the original statement, which is what they're asking for. So flip this, it's going to become if P, then Q, and negating it, we're going to take the words not off of it, or the symbol not. So we've already figured out the answer. Right here is the answer. It's the contrapositive. So the statement if Q, then not P is equivalent to the contrapositive of if P, then Q. All right, number 9 is fairly simple. They just want the converse of this statement. The statement says, if your grandmother gives you $60, then you can buy a video game. Well, remember, the converse is just flipping the hypothesis and the conclusion. So it's going to look like if Q, then P. Let's go ahead and label our sentence. The hypothesis here is your grandmother gives you $60. That's your P. Your Q, or your conclusion, is you can buy a video game. So my converse is just flipping those. So I want to start off with if you can buy a video game. So let's look at our answer choices. If you can buy a new video game, then your grandmother gave you $60. Well, there's our answer, because that is actually flipping the hypothesis and the conclusion. B is not correct because it says if your grandmother does not give you $60, then you cannot buy a video game. The converse doesn't do any negating. B threw in the words not. That negates the original sentence, so we can mark that out. C can also be ruled out because it says if you cannot buy a video game, so we can rule out C. We haven't done any negation with the converse. And D says if your grandmother gives you $60, then you cannot buy a new video game. Well, it almost looks right, except it's not flipped, and they only negated, or actually they added the word cannot, so that negates the one of the sentences. And we remember with the converse, we're not negating anything, so we can also rule that out. All right, number 10 is probably the trickiest problem in the on this whole test. And it says, which set of statements represents a valid argument? So remember, when we're talking about valid or invalid, we're talking about detachment or syllogism. So let's just go through one by one and see which one has a valid conclusion. So A says, if the interior angles of a polygon add up to 180 degrees, then it is a triangle. The second line says, if it is a triangle, then it has 3 sides. And since I have 2 if-then statements, I already know that this is syllogism. But the conclusion says, if the interior angles of a polygon do not add up to 180 degrees, then it is a triangle. So let's see. For syllogism to work, the conclusion, it is a triangle, needs to become the hypothesis of the second statement, it is a triangle. If those two things match, and in this case they do, we need to mark out the conclusion of the first statement and the hypothesis of the second statement. And what's left over should be our conclusion. If the interior angles of a polygon add up to 180 degrees, then it has 3 sides. So that's what our conclusion should say. If the interior angles of a polygon add up to 180 degrees, then it has 3 sides. Well, is that what it says? No, it says if the interior angles of a polygon do not add up. That is not what we said it has to be, so we can rule out A. So let's look at B. If the lake is not frozen, then we will go fishing. If we go fishing, then we will take the boat. So since there are two if-then statements starting off, I know that this is syllogism again. And in order for syllogism to work, we need to underline the conclusion of the first statement and the hypothesis of the second statement. They have to match for syllogism to work. We will go fishing, we go fishing. Those mean the same thing, so I'm going to mark out the conclusion and the hypothesis. And what's left over should be our third statement. So let's see if that's true. If the lake is not frozen, then we will take the boat. If we take the boat, then we went fishing. That obviously does not match what it's supposed to be, so we can rule out B. Alright, let's look at C. If it is snowing, then the buses cannot be on the road. The second statement says it is snowing. So since this only has one if-then statement, this is the law of detachment. And with the law of detachment, the way that needs to work is we're going to underline the hypothesis of the first statement. And then we're going to look at our second statement and see if that statement tells us whether or not the hypothesis is true. It is snowing. It is snowing. Those mean the same thing, so we can assume that the conclusion is true. The buses cannot be on the road. Is that what the conclusion says? Buses cannot be on the road. Yep, so there's our answer. The law of detachment works out perfectly. Let's look at D and figure out why it's not right. If Jane has a new pencil, then she is more likely to get an A in math. Jane got an A in math. Therefore, Jane has a new pencil. Well, let's see if this is valid. Since this only has one if-then statement, again, this is detachment. So we need to underline the hypothesis. Jane has a new pencil. And the second statement should mean the same thing as the hypothesis. The second statement says Jane got an A in math. Well, that doesn't say anything about her getting a new pencil, so we can rule out D. Alright, number 11 is basically we're just turning all of these 5 statements into symbolic notation. And on the test, these will be drag and drop. So your answer choices are going to be at the bottom, and you just need to drag them up where they need to be. So here's where it's telling you what each letter represents. P represents it is Monday, Q represents it is Friday, and R represents I am tired. So let's look at our first statement. It is Monday or I am tired. So I need to start with it is Monday. It is Monday is P, so I'm going to go ahead and write down a P. It is Monday, or I need the symbol for or, which is my V. I am tired. I am tired is R, so we're going to put R here. So P or R. And is that in my answer choices? It is right here, and we're only going to use these one time, so I'm going to mark that one out. The second statement says, if I am not tired. I am not tired. That is R, except they've added the word not here. So they have negated R. So I need to negate R. And since this is an if-then statement, I need my arrow. And the conclusion is then it is Friday. It is Friday matches Q. So I'm going to write Q. And notice they did not negate the conclusion. So I did not negate the symbol. But the hypothesis is negated because they added the word not. So that's why I added the symbol not. Is that in my answer choices? It is, so I'm going to mark that out because I'm only going to use it once. Therefore, I am tired. Well, I know the symbol for therefore is 3 dots in the shape of a triangle. I am tired is R, so I'm just going to say therefore R. There's actually 2 answer choices that have the symbol for therefore, so you need to be careful. The second part said I am tired. That matches up with R, so that's why I used R. So I'm going to mark that one out. I am tired if and only if it is Friday. If and only if I know is a biconditional and it needs the double arrow symbol. So let's start with I am tired. That is R. And then I need if and only if, which can be represented by the double arrow. It is Friday is represented by Q. So it's going to say R if and only if Q. And here that is in my answer choices, so I'm going to mark that one out. And finally, if it is Monday, so it is Monday represents P, and since it's an if-then statement, I'm going to draw my arrow. I am tired goes with R, so I'm just going to put an R here. So is that in my answer choices? Be careful because I have if P then R, and I also have if P then Q. So you got to really pay attention to what the sentences say and match them up with the correct letter up here. So we did not use all of the examples, but they were in our answer choices. All right, we're almost done. Let's go on over to number 12. And number 12 says, considering the following statements represented by P and Q. P says two lines are parallel. Q says do not intersect. And they want us to write the symbolic representation of the statement. Here are the choices that you can use. Again, this will be a drag and drop. So let's look at our statement. If two lines are not parallel, two lines are parallel is P. They've added the word not down here, so I need to negate P, not P. So I'm going to mark that out. And since it's an if-then statement, I need my if-then symbol, which is my arrow. So I'm going to mark that out. And the conclusion says they do intersect. Here it says they do not intersect. So again, they have negated the conclusion because up here it says do not. This one says they do. So I'm going to have to say not Q. Be careful with that one because a lot of people are going to be tempted to just write Q there and it's actually negated, so don't forget that negation symbol. Alright, we've got 3 more problems to do. Number 13 says, below is the contrapositive of a conditional statement. If we do not go to school tomorrow, then it is not Monday. What is the original conditional statement? So the original statement, it tells us that this statement is the contrapositive. So I remember that contrapositive is not Q. If not Q, then not P. So the original statement is just going to be by flipping and negating these once again. That will lead you back to the original statement. So let's start with the conclusion. If it is not Monday, I need to negate it. So I'm going to say if it is Monday. Then I'm going to put the hypothesis. We do not go to school tomorrow. So I want to take the word not out because I am negating it. Then we do go to school tomorrow. And I misspelled tomorrow, so let me fix that. Tomorrow. Okay, so you just needed to go backwards from that one. Alright, almost there. Number 14 says identify the conclusion to the argument. So since we're talking about an argument, we're talking about either the law of syllogism or the law of detachment. So let's figure out which one it is. They are both if-then statements. If you don't study, then you will get an F. If you get an F, then your parents will ground you. So since there's 2 if-then statements there, it is syllogism. And for syllogism to work, again, I need this conclusion of the first statement needs to match the hypothesis of the second statement. Do they match? You will get an F. You get an F. That means the same thing. So we're going to mark out this conclusion, and we're going to mark out this hypothesis. And whatever is left over, I'm going to circle, and that should be my answer. If you don't study, then your parents will ground you. So let's just find that in our answers. If you don't study, then your parents will ground you is D. So we can rule out everything else. And finally, the last question is, which is the inverse of the following statement? So remember, inverse is we're going to negate our conclusion and our hypothesis. We're going to negate our hypothesis and our conclusion. That is what taking the inverse means. So it is hot outside. That's my hypothesis. We will get ice cream. That's my conclusion. So I'm going to label those, and then I'm just going to have to negate them. So instead of saying if it is hot outside, I need to find something that says if it is not hot outside. Looks like B might work. If it is not hot outside, then we will not get ice cream. Yep, B is the answer because we've negated the hypothesis and the conclusion. If you read through the rest of the answers, you can clearly see that those don't follow the rules for inverse. All right, I hope this test review has helped. Again, your test will be in 2 days. So if you need to, this video will stay up on Canvas. Go back and